Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Rumcast. This is the podcast that talks all things rum related with the people who love and shape it. I am one of your hosts, Will Hookinga, actually flying solo today on this podcast. My esteemed co-host John Gulla is actually taking in everything the country of Italy has to offer right now, going all over the place there. I'm sure when he's back, he'll have lots to report back. Hopefully he's hunting down some good rum bottles there in the home of Vellier, although I don't think he's making it to Genoa during his trip. But anyway, I am flying solo on this intro, as I did during the interview for this episode as well with Ben Inglis, the distillery manager for the Islay Rum Company. This is a distillery located, as the name suggests, on the island of Islay in Scotland, which you likely know for making a much different spirit. And that's really part of the origin story for a second that I want to just zoom out real quick and bring you up to speed about one of the things that's so fascinating about this distillery. So imagine for a second that you own an independent bottling company based in Scotland that specializes naturally in Scotch. You've been bottling whiskeys for years successfully, and you decide that you want to go beyond bottling and also start producing your own whiskey. Why not, right? So you're imagining building a whiskey distillery in Islay, the island home to legendary distilleries like Laphroaig, Lagavulin, and others. But before you can carry your plans out, you happen to meet an aspiring distiller in his late 20s who has been quietly planning to start a distillery of his own on Islay as well, with one major difference. He wants to start a rum distillery. 99% of the time, this story would end with the whiskey bottler saying, "Hey, good luck with that, buddy." Just, continuing on with their plans to build a whiskey distillery. But in this case, somehow this young aspiring distiller who at the time had never worked in a distillery convinces the whiskey bottlers that it's actually a better idea to build a rum distillery in the place with a global reputation for making some of the best whiskey in the world. So that's the story of Islay Rum Company and Ben Inglis, the aspiring and now actual rum distiller that I interviewed for this episode. And it's a cool story in its own right, but the primary reason I wanted to talk to Ben is that the rum they're making there in Islay is actually quite impressive. And if you've listened to our Guide to UK Rum episode a few episodes back, you heard John and I try two of their rums, both unaged, because this distillery has only been around for about 2 years now in terms of actually making rum. They haven't released an aged product yet. So they have like a flagship unaged rum, and then they have a rum that was a limited kind of experimental release that was very long fermentation time. All of this rum is pot distilled. They have a double retort pot still there in the distillery that's, reminiscent of some of the styles of pot stills you might find in the Caribbean, which you don't usually find at a, new young rum distillery in a location like this. And I think the natural expectation when people hear, double retort pot still, the distiller is into funky rums, like they expect something that's going to be trying to be like a Jamaica rum or something like that. But when you taste the rum, particularly the experimental release between the two, it's earthy and fruity and herbal all at the same time. It does have what I would describe as a funk to it, but it's not really a Caribbean funk or a Jamaica funk or, a St. Lucia funk or anything like that. And I think, that's kind of one of the cool things about this, because a lot of times you see new distilleries trying their hand at doing all this out there funky experimental stuff. And a lot of times, that those techniques, it has a steep learning curve. It's not something that I think is easy to do just out of the box. And so a lot of times when I see that stuff, I get a little guarded and I try to manage my expectations, and I go in expecting something that maybe just tastes weird, but not really good. And this is one of those exceptions where I am a fan of the rum. John enjoyed it as well. Obviously, this is all subjective stuff and our tastes are not universal, but I was excited to talk to Ben, not just because it's a cool story and interesting that a rum distillery now exists in a place that is, known for this very specific type of whiskey, but also because I think what they're doing is interesting. I think they're going about it the right way. And what I've tasted so far is very impressive, and I'm looking forward to what comes next. So we get into all kinds of stuff in the interview. One of the really interesting things to me is just putting the name Islay on a bottle and the expectations that come with that, not only in terms of reputation, but just when people hear Islay and a spirit coming from that country, or not country, but region, they expect a certain type of flavor profile sometimes. Islay scotches are known for that peaty, iodine, smoke, all that stuff. It's a very, it can be quite aggressive and pungent and very recognizable. So, how do you kind of manage all the expectations and stuff that come with that when you're making a rum there for the first time? So we got into that. We got into all the nerdy stuff of the production process. We talked about kind of where things are going next with the distillery. Really great conversation. So if you are able to check out their stuff, I recommend it for sure. It's an interesting experience. And also, quickly, before we get over to the interview, I wanted to give a shout out to a listener from the UK, actually, named Shane, who sent us an email recently letting us know that he had just kind of discovered the podcast through Stephen James of the Rum Diaries blog. So shout out to Stephen as well for spreading the word. And in the last 50 days, Shane somehow managed to listen to all 104 episodes that had been released to date of the Rumcast, which means he had to average slightly over 2 episodes per day, which is a truly astonishing pace to me. And I have no way of confirming this, but I think that has to be the world record for fastest time listening through the Rumcast catalog. So very impressive stuff to Shane. And hey, since you're in the UK, my hope is that you enjoy this episode enough to hop on over to Islay and give Ben a visit at the distillery and check out what they're doing there. Also a very interesting setting. The distillery is actually in a building called the Old Lemonade Factory, which is where this lemonade brand used to be made in Islay, which I learned in my research for this interview that lemonade in the UK is not like lemonade in the States. It's more like a sparkling soda kind of, I think closer to something like Sprite, maybe, if I'm reading correctly. Whereas in the US, it's just lemon juice, water, and a whole lot of sugar all mixed together. But anyway, lots of great stuff in this conversation with Ben, and I hope y'all enjoy it. All right, I'm here with Ben Inglis, distillery manager at the Islay Spirits Company. And Ben, well, we were actually just talking about this, but I'm very big on pronunciation, and it kills me when I mispronounce something on the podcast. So anytime we're doing an interview and there's some, name of a rum or a last name or something, I'm always like going on YouTube and trying to find someone else saying it so that I can say it properly. And, a couple months back, John and I did our UK rum episode, and we tried 2 of your rums, and I think they presented me with the greatest challenge yet of trying to figure out the pronunciation in advance, because they have Scottish Gaelic names. And so I tried my best on the episode, but I just want to start by, I want to try pronouncing them, and I want you to correct my pronunciation, which I'm sure is not 100% wrong. So I'm going to start with your flagship unaged rum, the 45% ABV. It's spelled Geal, which I believe was Gael. Gael? Is that close at all? Am I in the what's the proper way?
Yeah, you're in the ballpark there. So it's Gal.
Gael.
Yeah. So you're not far away at all there. You're pretty good.
Okay. Well, now we're going to graduate to the one that seems a little tougher, which is the experimental release Unya Vor. Is that close at all?
It's not too far away. Good more.
You don't have to be too nice.
It's pretty good, to be fair. So when I was listening to the originally, and I was thinking, yeah, that's not too bad there at all.
So it is more then. It's pronounced with an M sound. Is that okay? See, the closest I could do, I typed into ChatGPT asking it, and it was telling me that in Gaelic the MH sound is like a V, which sounds like maybe completely wrong now. So I was steered down an incorrect road. So Unya More is less complicated than I originally anticipated. Okay, well, I'm glad we've got that out of the way. I've made myself look a little bit foolish now, so just trying to make this seem like a comfortable, safe space to talk in. There's so much, I'm so curious about what you're doing, and anyone who listened to the UK rum episode knows that John and I were both really impressed with the rum that you're putting out over there. You've only been around, when was the first distillation, official distillation, was that 2022? Is that right?
January of 22.
Okay. So the backstory sounds pretty interesting. As I understand it, you have been interested in rum for a very long time and were maybe kind of working on your own, rum recipe, sort of like what is your background in rum? How did you get started making rum in Islay?
So I suppose I lived in Islay for most of my life. I'm 32 this year, and I've
Okay.
been here maybe 4 or 5 or something like that. So I grew up around distilleries and whiskey and everything else on Islay. But as you grow up, you don't tend to start drinking single malt Scotch whiskey when you're a teenager. And
It's not the first, it's not the first thing that you pick up.
yeah, exactly. So when I started drinking, I started drinking rum, and I started like a lot of people do with Bacardi and Morgans and everything like that, and different spice rums. And I really enjoyed spice rums in my kind of late teenage years and even into my early 20s. But then I was gifted a bottle of Appleton Estate by my wife,
Ah.
my girlfriend at the time, but my now wife, and she was the old bottle. It was the XO, I think it was called at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first taste, really, of, I suppose, proper rum. Or discounting Cardi and things. And after that, I suppose I just got a lot more interested in, like, kind of the production side of things and how it was made and where it was made. And really started hammering into different countries and different styles of rum, column still, pot still, sugarcane, juice rather than molasses. So that piqued my interest at the kind of early stage of different rums and how they were produced and manufactured in different places around the world. And I started looking into like those specific kind of manufacturing process that made rums taste the way they were, or if it was a location, like where it was in the world, how did that have an impact on the way that the spirit tasted at the end. So in my early 20s, I did a lot of reading, and the same as everyone else. And maybe I suppose I've got a little bit kind of mechanical mind on me, so I like to know how things work. And even as from a young boy, like I grew up in Brookladdy, and I was constantly around the distillery. They were kind of in and out, and getting kicked out when you're not supposed to be in.
Just peeking in the windows and everything.
Exactly, that was when I was a kid. So I even had a curiosity then, I suppose. Not necessarily in like sort of drinking the whiskey, but more like what was happening in there. There's so many smells and sounds, and when you're around a distillery. So that piqued my interest, I suppose, from a young age. And I guess my curiosity grew from there. Till, like I say, in my early 20s, I started thinking about rum and more of like a career choice. Could I get into a distillery? And I started off with a few interviews in distilleries around Islay from the whiskey distilleries, and I never had much luck. There was always quite they were very popular jobs. There was quite high kind of demand. So at one point, I was just like, well, maybe I should just try myself with doing rum. And that was, like I say, in my early 20s. And I kind of went through many years just trying to figure it out and seeing how you could fund it, and looking at how you even go about starting a distillery with the legal side of it. So I did a lot of reading on the more like the kind of technical side and the legal side of it, and then to kind of just build my knowledge about it. But I never had any kind of formal experience or formal training, if you like, in distillation or rum at all. I'd never even visited another rum distillery, but you can find so much information on the internet. So
Yeah.
and talking to other people, and like a little bit later on, after I'd kind of got the initial idea in there, talking to other people in the industry in Scotland, in those early days, there was already a few rum distilleries kind of cropping up around the country. Jake Out, Sugar House, even like some Dark Master and things like that. They had already started, I suppose, at that time. So I spoke to a couple of the guys who gave me a lot of help and a lot of guidance with, various different subjects and setting up a rum distillery. I feel there's quite a good relationship between a lot of the guys in Scotland, and you can always ask advice and stuff like that from each other. So yeah, it was from then I started really seriously thinking, maybe 4 years into that original kind of idea, I started thinking, right, okay, I'm going to start really pushing for this. So I put together a business plan, and I went to like our local council for funding and things like that. They told me you need a few different things in order to give you funding, and I went as far as getting a interview with Southern Glazers down in Miami with a big
Oh, wow.
distribution company. Went over there because it was just almost pure chance by meeting the right people at the right time. And I managed to get an interview there. It never materialized into anything, but I suppose it showed myself how serious I was about going the whole 9 yards with it.
So when you put together a business plan for a rum distillery and take it to people around Islay, what is the initial reaction to that? Are they kind of bewildered at the idea? Do they think it's cool? Are they like, what are you talking about? How did that go?
At this time, you could see the trend with rum. Gin was obviously exploding. Craft beer and gin were really popular here. And I thought, well, surely these being popular, these kind of craft distilleries or smaller boutique kind of places will make it kind of appealing and seem like it could be a successful business. But you go to some of the local governing bodies and try and pitch the idea of doing a rum distillery on Islay, and this is a moment when gin is still exploding, and they're like, what are you even talking about? So it wasn't successful. I'm not going to lie. The first good few years, it didn't get anywhere really. I had some really good people on Islay. My wife, at the time, she worked as a receptionist for a local hotel. Who was owned by a local guy, Roland, his name is. And anyway, he was also an accountant, on the side kind of thing. And he came and he spoke to me, and I went and had numerous meetings with him, and he helped me with the business plan and things like that, and kind of make sense of a lot of numbers. And so there was some people who were really keen and really on board and really helpful to those early stages of me getting the ball rolling. So there was support, definitely. But, you take it to somebody and you're asking for X amount of money and they're like, I don't think so. It was frustrating at the time. But I suppose in the long run, it was probably just as well that was the case. Because I maybe wouldn't have been in the position now. The original idea was I've got some land around the house, in my house, and the original idea was to build a really small kind of setup there and maybe have a 100 litre or 200 litre still. But how we really got started with this place was I was working as a delivery driver for a local builder's merchant, a kind of lumber supply yard, if you like. And one of the customers I was delivering to was kind of a big name in the whiskey industry over here. And we were talking away, and this was the time when a new whiskey distillery was being built on the island. And he was like, "Oh, would you be keen on a job in the new distillery that's up the road we're currently building?" He had a kind of big hand in designing it and things like that. And I just said to him, I've got some plans of my own. I kind of want to see out at least and see if they're going to materialize into anything. And he was like, "Well, what is it?" And I was a bit kind of apprehensive about saying anything. This guy's been in the whiskey industry for many years, and he kickstarted the Botanist Gin.
Oh, wow, yeah. I've got a bottle of that downstairs, yeah.
And I wasn't sure because at the time, I'd had a few people who had told about it. The very few people I told about it said, "Look, keep this idea to yourself," because there's been many a case where someone's gone public with an idea and somebody who's got the means and the money to start up has just gone, "That's a good idea, just stole it," kind of thing.
Especially being able to say that you started the first rum distillery on Islay could be very attractive.
Exactly. So that was kind of my thought. So it was all a bit apprehensive. Anyway, I spilled the beans to him eventually, and he goes, "Look, come down. We'll have a chat, have some lunch." And we came down and talked with him. And he's like, "I've got a few people," because he was one of these guys who was pro the actual production process. He is a total romantic for it. Okay. And the business is secondary to everything else. He's a hell of a salesman and everything like that. He can talk the talk and walk the walk, but you can tell he has got whiskey in his veins. He absolutely loves the industry and everything like that. And I think when he sees another person, a young person especially, who's got a keen interest, he wants to nurture that any way he can. So he was more than helpful on that. Anyway, he put me in contact with Andrew and Caroline, who I now work with the Vintage Malt Whisky Company.
Right.
And these guys, they might be able to work with you. It's at least worth a meeting. So we had a kind of first meeting, and it went very well. And I pitched the idea. They had already bought the building over here, you see, and they were looking to go into the production side of the industry. They already were an independent bottler, so they bottled their own whiskey, and they have done that since 1982. So they've got a lot of experience in the industry and things like that, and they wanted to make the jump from bottler to producer.
So they have this plan. They have this plan to start their own Scotch whiskey distillery, and then in comes this young guy who's passionate about rum and wants to start a rum distillery. How did you possibly convince them like, oh, the Scotch thing that Islay is famous for, that your business is all built around, don't do that thing, do rum, which no one's done here. How did you win them over on that?
I don't really know. Sometimes I think that. Oh, no, that's not true. I mean, sometimes I feel like that. But no, we had a meeting, and I suppose I pitched the idea of doing rum because it was on this slow trend, upward trend. And, it's been booming, I suppose, but from the last, I don't know, 5 years or something like that. It's been kind of steadily going up. But it was more of a slow burner than the overnight success that gin had been, and even, like, say, craft beer and things like that had gone through the roof.
Yeah.
So I suppose I showed them some numbers that I'd researched, and I told them how passionate I was about it, and convinced them, or not convinced them, but convincing them that it was something completely different. There's about to be 11 whiskey distilleries on Islay, and there's more on the way. There's another 2 or 3 in planning stages and stuff like that. And you think,
wow,
there's a one island that's not more than 25 miles long, and you're going to have 15 whiskey distilleries or something on there, 14 whiskey distilleries possibly in the next couple of years. And I suppose, in my point of view, it's like, how do you discern yourself against the rest of what he's producing over here? I found it such a strange idea for somebody to go like full on into whiskey on Islay when there's so much here already. And I think my point of view with that, I'm not sure if like that necessarily changed their mind or anything like that. But I suppose we worked away together, and I explained what I wanted to do. I wanted to make like a traditional, we're making rum in Scotland here, but methods are traditional at least. I didn't want it to be pretend to be anything that wasn't. I wanted to be like simple and good quality. There was no gimmicks or anything like that when it came to making the spirit. And the same kind of ethos as whiskey on Islay, I suppose, is a lot of it is about quality, and he's got such a reputation for quality. So yeah, they after the first couple of meetings, took a little while, and probably took a couple of maybe over a year to even work out that first down on paper idea, if you like. And then decide what we were going to do with the building. The building had to be fully renovated. It was built in the late 50s, and it never really had any upkeep. So it was a lot of work that went into the actual distillery itself. We decided what equipment we were going to have, how big it was going to be, and then what else we were going to do with the land that we had here, which all takes so much more time than you think. And then there's all the planning applications and building warrants and all that kind of stuff that you have to undergo, and that all takes way longer than you think. So this was all, a couple of years in the making, even this part of it, if you like, before we even made a drop. I think we started work on the distillery in 2020, and we didn't finish until January 22. So it was pretty much 2 years. Obviously, COVID was right.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah.
Which was a nightmare.
Definitely a factor.
That was a nightmare too. Building materials and the raw materials for the still and the equipment went through the roof. But we were quite lucky. We managed to get all of our kind of like deposits down and things like that, and secured quotes for equipment before everything went crazy. Nice. That was fortunate. And over the last, obviously we've been in production for 2 years now, and 2 years before that we were getting the building ready. And then 5 years before that, I suppose, or 5 or 6 years before that, was the time where I was just trying to get the ball rolling and meet the right people. And so it took around about 6 years, really, for me to get into the stage where we were committed to building a distillery, a rum distillery, and then to building work. And then, here we are. It was 10 years later from the initial idea.
So as you're going through the process of talking with Andrew and the people at Vintage Malt Whisky Society about doing a distillery, at any point are they like, so can you make good rum? Like, does that come up? Do they want to taste something, but before they, and like, how do you manage that process without incriminating yourself, Well,
let the imagination do the work then. I won't go into too much detail, I suppose, about any of that. But I had solid theory. Let's just say I had solid theory of the rum production process, or at least I thought I did. I thought I had a theory until you actually come to. It was a proper scary moment actually, because I had complete control over within a degree of like what equipment we were going to have. So what we've got here at the distillery is we've got like kind of a makeup tank where we add the molasses and the water, and that's got a big mixer and that mixes it up. And then we've got 5 fermentation vessels, which are each 2,000 litres. And then we've got our 2,000 litre still, which obviously the pot and twin retort.
Right. And this just to emphasize for listeners, this is not a typical style of still that one would spot outside of the Caribbean. It's a double retort pot still. So, and I'm sure it's probably different as well from the ones in the Caribbean. It's not like it's an exact copy of the stills at Hampden or something like that. But it's definitely not the type of, like if you go to any of these newer rum distilleries around the world, outside the Caribbean, most of the time you won't find a still like this. And so I was really curious to ask, how did you land on that still design? And, was it something you really had to push for? Because I'm assuming that it wasn't a cheap investment for that style of still. It looked like it was made specifically for the distillery. So what was that process like, and why were you set on that specific type of still?
Yeah, so I suppose when you first type into Google, when years ago, like rum still or Caribbean rum still or something like that, what is the first image that pops up? It's
Double
all
retort pot
traditional
still.
Gaelic. And I think as soon as I saw that, and I was like, oh man, that's cool. Like, initially that's what all it was until I started to understand like the actual process around it. So you see it, and I kind of fallen in love with the design of still originally just by looking at it. And then from, like I say, that kind of, I suppose, mechanical mind on me, wanting to know how things work, and I'm a sucker for kind of clever engineering, if you like. And I still maintain that, that type of still from when it was first introduced, and even before it was introduced for making alcohol, it was chemistry apparatus originally. So when you look at it, or an iteration of it wasn't maybe exactly the same as the pot still that we know, but, I've got drawings of old glass chemical apparatus that was very similar, and you go back to a couple hundred years ago and you think, oh, this is amazing technology for hundreds of years ago.
Right.
When I started learning about, like, say, the manufacturing process and obviously drinking the rum from various distilleries around the world, you've got the Mount Gay and Hampden and Foursquare and all these places that use double retort stills, and in smaller places as well. And I always knew that I liked that kind of flavor, that kind of style. An oiliness to it, it's heavy. I always enjoy that type of spirit that you can get from these still. But your thing is as well, what I suppose I learned very quickly is when we started using it, is just because you've got a double retort still doesn't mean you're going to get this heavy, funky liquid. And I think that shocked me a lot to start with. When we first started distilling, I was like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And I knew roughly what we were going to get, but I was quite surprised, like how light the initial runs were from the still. And even Gyal is not necessarily really funky or estery or anything like that. There's definitely a fruitiness there. Especially our second batch is a little bit more flavoursome as well, I think, than our first batch was. But yeah, it took us a little while to kind of dial in what we wanted to get from the still and get our recipe right and things like that. That's what I'm
how much in the evolution of that recipe, what was more influential, I guess, between changing the fermentation process versus changing aspects of distillation? Was it both, or was one really like the big lever more so than the other one?
I would say the fermentation was the bigger, kind of like, the bigger lever, if you like, than the other one, than distillation. But obviously, we actually did change our distillation, our cut points and things like that quite a bit. After we were using it for a little while, we kind of got the hang of where to make your cut points and how early you do things and whatnot. So yeah, they did have and our, like, you and More, for example, has got wildly different cut points to Gal. They're much shorter, much tighter cuts than More. So
yeah, I know on the bottle it said only 165 bottles, so a pretty small batch, right?
Exactly, yeah, it's a really small batch, and that was over a course of like 3 distillations.
Wow.
Three different distillations, 3 different fermentations. So it was that 6,000 litres of wash only produced those 165 bottles of that mark, if you like.
Did you do anything with the parts of the cuts that were not used in the rum? Did you redistill those or anything?
Of course, yeah. I mean, we keep some of those for when you get to a certain point. They are very similar, or the kind of cuts we didn't use for doing more are quite similar to our standard kind of stuff we would put into casks. So we kept the three kind of distillations, the leftover cut, if you like, from the three distillations, and
Okay.
we put them into casks.
I definitely I want to talk more about the production process, but before that, you're talking about what the initial rum tasted like to you, and kind of dialing in the recipe of what you want it to be like and everything. And one of the things that have thought about ever since first seeing the name Islay Rum is just everything that comes with the word Isla being on a spirits bottle label, right? And I think it's from my perspective at least, I could see how it could be sort of a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, people see Isla, and even if they're not familiar with rum, I feel like just the presence of that word lends some respect and gravitas, sort of, given the whiskey's reputation. But it also, Isla whiskey's flavor profile, obviously there's diversity between all the distilleries on there, but there are certain characteristics that people expect when they hear Isla Scotch, the most common ones being, smoke and that sort of thing. So did you feel any pressure sort of for the rum to taste like it comes from Isla in some respect? And I don't, when I say that, I don't even know what it means, right? Because obviously the
No,
process you use for your rum, like you're not peating the rum or anything like that. So, but is what I'm saying making sense? Did that go through your brain at all?
yeah, I mean, of course, you can't live here, and you can't, especially can't call your product like no anything with the word Isla on it without thinking about along those lines. And you're absolutely right. In more than one ways, I suppose when you look at anything that comes from here, exactly what you just said, people expect gold and peat and smoke and everything like that. And so many people have actually asked me, when you're at shows and things, oh, is it peated or is there any incorporation of peat into the rum? And we have a flavored rum, like a spirit drink flavor,
Right.
that incorporates that side of it into it. And we have got a new release coming out this year. It's an aged release that is also going to incorporate that into it. And
Oh, interesting.
it'll be a running theme with some of our the cask aged rum as well, because I feel like you can definitely utilize that side of it for people who are visiting Isla and know Isla for whiskey and smoky whiskies and primarily come here for whiskey. So you can make that bridge between rum and whiskey a lot easier for them to cross if you've got something that's got a little hint of smoke in it as well. Our white rum is obviously, it's nothing to do with smoke or peat or anything like that. It's pure single rum, if you like. We still had a lot of people asking us when we originally released Gal, like, or are you gonna do anything with peat, or are you gonna do a flavored or a spiced rum? And that's really why we went ahead and made the spiced rum initially.
Here, take this. This is not that, but this is that. Yeah.
Kind of. I mean, I suppose that's the joy of rum. There's so many different avenues that you've got available to you to explore, and I kind of moved away from spice rum very early on into aged rums and white rums and things like that. So I'm not saying we didn't want to make something like I've never make something that I didn't think was good myself, but it
Sure.
was other people to enjoy. So, oh, we're asking you to flavored rum. Well, yeah, okay, we'll do one, and I'll make it to the best of my ability, and I'll make it interesting. And we, like I say, we add the smoke in that way to keep those people happy. But then again, you've got so many different customer bases. The people who are drinking spice rum aren't going to be drinking whiskey as well, generally speaking. So yeah, I think like sort of when you say, did you have any kind of feelings about you having to incorporate that? We do, I suppose, in a certain fashion. But like you said, I think having Isla on the bottle is a double-edged sword, because you've also got a certain kind of, what's the word for it? I suppose expectation to maintain a certain level of quality.
Yeah, for sure. It's got to be good.
Yeah, exactly. If you're going to use the Isla name on it, then it has to be live up to that kind of notoriety, if you like, even. And I guess that when you're saying that as well, the other thing I was thinking is when we had installed the pot and double exort, some people were automatically assuming it was going to be, because especially folk who knew me were like, well, it's going to be a funky rum and things like that, and or for our initial release. And we had a couple of different options when we went to release Gal, and we actually went for the kind of tamer one, if you like, just because I wanted it to be something that was really approachable for anyone to pick up and drink. And there is still some people, we get visitors in the distillery and you can tell they're maybe not necessarily used to drinking straight rum or and they had to try some of the white rum, and they're like, "Oh man, that's too much for me," kind of thing. You're like, "Well, that's the
Yeah.
tone version," and all.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I remember because we got a sample of Gyal from a friend of the podcast, and then like I said, we ordered this from the Whiskey Exchange, knowing that they would be very different rums. But I was excited to compare the differences between them, and my expectation for Gyal was almost that it was going to be not neutral, but just like very straightforward, maybe a little bit on the boring side compared to something like this. But I was really pleasantly surprised in that. I think you nailed it in describing it as something that's approachable, because I think it's very approachable. But also, if you are someone who is into rum and likes funky stuff, I don't think it's a boring rum at all. I thought that it kind of went down the middle of that line between interesting and approachable in a really cool way. And I remember when John and I got to that rum in the tasting, we were tasting through a bunch of, lower proof white unaged rums. And that was the one where we got to, and we were really like, okay, here's something different, So even though it is approachable, it still has something interesting going on. And so that, I think that's one of the hardest things to do. And I was just really impressed with that. So how did you guys, like, at what point did you know, okay, this is the one we're going to bottle? Is there a certain characteristic that you're looking for, or is it just a matter of you try it, other people try it, and you're all just like, this is really good? What kind of, how do you know when you've arrived?
when I still doubt myself daily on everything I do, and I'm probably my own worst critic when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to any new product. You should ask my wife actually. Whenever we release a new product, I must be a nightmare to live with, because all I keep going on about, I wonder, are people going to like this? Is this the right thing we're doing? Is it the right strength? Is it the right price point? Everything like that. And it's a really interesting one, because I think I knew what I didn't want it to be, but I took a long time to realize, or not to realize, but to kind of come to the agree with myself of what I wanted it to be, if you like. When we first distilled, and when we first started running distilling, and it was like, well, this is, it's a lot lighter than I thought it might be, and the flavor wise, and it was I don't know, yeah, it was more neutral. It was a little more kind of fresh, if you like, or green, if you like. I don't know if it's the right word.
Yeah.
We tinkered with the recipe, and we started using dunder for the gal. So we started adding different amounts of dunder into the wash, into when we're making up the wash, until we arrived at like a number of how a certain amount of liters we put into the wash, and say, well, actually, that's getting interesting. So we ran like a few generations of the dunder in with the wash, and by the time we got to maybe like, I don't know, 6 or 7 distillations in, I feel like I was like, right, I'm much more happy. And you tasted what it was like, because we obviously kept samples of the first, I don't know,
Yeah.
samples of a lot of the runs, but we kept samples of a lot of the distillations at the very start. And you try and compare them, and you're like, right, there's a much more noticeable difference between what we started with and what we have here now. And then when it came to, I think it's difficult in the distillery as well, because you go nose blind, you go taste blind a lot when you're tasting and nosing, and you're in here all day.
Yeah.
And I think I remember taking it home over a weekend, and it was like a Sunday evening, and I hadn't been in the distillery for a day, or almost a couple of days at that point. And I tried it at home. Then I was like, that seems right. That's what I'm looking for. But then as soon as we went to bottle it and we sent it away to the bottlers, I was like, no, it's
Yeah, this is shit. I've made a mistake. Yeah. Yeah.
terrifying. So one thing that was quite cool actually is funnily enough, when we bottled our first release of Gal, and I went out to the bottle. We don't bottle on site at the distillery on Islay. We bottle in Glasgow. So I went out to Glasgow for the bottling of our first ever run and everything like that, and I walked into the bottling hall and immediately knew it was our rum, because I could smell it.
Yeah,
It was
that's
like,
cool.
that was such a cool moment. And it was, funnily enough, it was on the day of my 30th birthday that we did it.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So I walked in there, and I just felt on top of the world. Immediately, sorry, I smelled our rum, and I was like, that's so distinguishable. I could tell that a mile away. And I was like, yeah, I think. And then I did put my mind at ease a little bit. Then I was like, I think we've done the right thing here when we got it bottled and everything like that. And then obviously the proofs in the pudding, I suppose, were when we went to actually release it and sell it. And we made for I don't know if you've heard of the kind of fake shield year, the whiskey festival on Islay. It happens every year.
Oh, no, I wasn't familiar with that. Okay. So yearly whiskey festival.
We have a yearly whiskey, or I mean, it's a festival of Islay really, but the whiskey is
Okay.
the main aspect of it. So we had an open day for that first whiskey festival a few years ago now. We released our rum like on that kind of festival, if you like. So we had obviously a lot of whiskey drinkers, but a lot of locals came in as well, and we had overwhelming support, which was great. And the rum went down really well, and we made hundreds and hundreds of cocktails with it. So it was after that initial release, I was dead happy then. And then I think we're on to, I don't know what batch we'll be on now. We've got it bottled, but even into our second batch of the Gal. And I think the flavours only increased and got better as the kind of the second batch was released and the third batch as well. And I think that was from the kind of still getting worn in and having its natural patina and things like that created it. I think, it made a difference of after a few months of running the still, it's kind of bedded in, if you like.
So it's less a matter of like, it's not like you made big changes between batch 1 and 2. It's just you're more practiced, and also the equipment has been more, worn in a little bit.
Yeah, precisely. So I mean, I think it'll grow and it'll get better as we go as well. And we've learned so much in the last couple of years. It's sometimes I need to remind myself it's only been 2 years. It's not a long time to make a start. But yeah, it gets better all the time, I think. For Gal, it was a case of I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew it when I found it, when I got there, and I was like, right, I think that's ready now.
And for the listeners out there who love the super nerdy in-depth details of production, how for Gyal, how long are you fermenting? What kind of yeast? Where's your molasses coming from? Give us like all the fine points on that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So most of the molasses we buy in comes from predominantly it's been India. We've had some batches that come in from like South America and southern states of America. We've had some coming from Africa, but predominantly it's been India. And the natural question that comes after that usually is, do you notice the difference between the molasses? That's generally what people ask. And to be honest, I think there has been, it's a natural product at the end of the day. The actual makeup of the molasses changes batch on batch. So it's never exactly the same. And I think unless you were getting it from like one place all the time, the same refinery or the same plantation, then I think it'd be very difficult to spot the difference. In my opinion, at least, maybe that's a controversial point. But a lot of the molasses suppliers as well, you've got combination of, who knows, like multiple different refineries from all over one country, perhaps. And then they'll be centralized at one depot and they can be mixed there. So you can never, right. You may get an origin country, but you can't get an exact location from where you're taking it from down to, or they'll probably be able to trace where it came back from, but it will never be from one specific place. It'll be from multiple. And then you've got storage tanks that are more local to us that'll hold, say, 100,000 litres at a time or something like that. And they don't wash out the tanks between batches of molasses. It's all the same thing to them. They're shifting it so quickly, so you get a mix there as well.
It's like a molasses Solera.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the original question was right now.
No, that's really good, because I think it's one of the first things people think about when they hear UK and rum is just where are they getting the molasses from, and obviously there's a long history in rum of places far away from the Caribbean bringing molasses there and distilling it. That was happening in the United States hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But so you have the molasses for Gyal. Is it about a week-long fermentation? Is that am I remembering correctly?
That's right, yeah. So we were talking about the finer points of the production process. That's right.
Yeah, no, we got back. It's fine.
Absolutely, yeah. So generally speaking, it's around about a week. So about 7 days.
Okay.
So we have 5 fermentation tanks that we run on rotation through Monday through Friday. So it's actually maybe just shy of a week long. So if we distill number 1 fermenter on Monday, and we'll come in at, say, get the still running at 7:30 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And then we'll refill that fermenter we just emptied. and pitch our yeast by midday. So you're a few hours off of the full kind of 7 days, if you like, but it's round about there. So it works for we could definitely shorten the fermentation. We could start the fermentation as warmer. We could probably cut it down to like 3 or 4 days, possibly. But I don't really want to go down that route. And if we want to have production, I think what we're going to do is we're just double the amount of fermentation vessels we have. So rather than put the time down, we'll just increase our fermentation space. You've got quite a lot going on, even after the alcoholic fermentation finishes. You've got the kind of dead wash sitting there on this yeast bed, and you've got all that kind of thing. So there's more going on in developing flavour than just the alcoholic fermentation or those few days where it's probably kind of going, if you like. We use around about 700 kilograms of molasses per 2,000 litre batch of the wash that we make. We use a variety of different yeasts, or we've used a variety of different yeasts. We started with the yeast from Lallemand, which is we tried 2 from them, actually. They're typical rum yeast, if you like. And then we went to AB Maori and tried them. They're kind of more known for supplying, they supply yeast for everyone, but they supply a lot of the yeast for the whiskey here. They're rum yeasts. We also tried their whiskey yeast as well. And that's something I kind of want to go and experiment a little bit more with. It's trying some of their whiskey yeast, just to see how it kind of plays out. But when you're trying and trialing yeast, I feel like you need to do a good couple of weeks, especially when you're using high and low wines from the previous distillation. It takes a little while to get through, to cleanse them of everything they've picked up from the last type of fermentation, if you like. And we tried some of their yeast. We're currently on a company called WHC Lab. So they supply yeast for a few different people around Scotland now. They're relatively small. They're based in Ireland. They're smaller than the other couple of companies anyway. But there are some really interesting things. I think there's most of the supply companies for yeast have been really getting on board with like the craft brewing and craft distillation scene, and they're seeing the kind of pound signs, if you like, on all the marketing on their side of things that can come, and all the sales that can be generated from this boom and the interest in what people are using. So I suppose I'm a little bit mindful of some of that sometimes. Like, I am 100% in agreement that it can make so much difference. But I'm also a little bit wary that you can put a fancy name on something, yeast wine, and a brewer or a distiller will be like, "Oh, that sounds great, I'm going to try that." Yeah. So I'm just calling me a skeptic, I suppose. But
no, but I mean, it's not like you're not, as you said, it's not like you're not experimenting and trying interesting stuff, which probably means we should talk about Unya more a little bit. So whereas Gyal is about week fermentation, and you said you're using some dunder in the process now as well. This one, on the other hand, 4 to 6 weeks fermentation time. You're using, I think it was described as matured dunder, native bacteria, and 2 commercial distiller's yeast strains. So this is like the geeky bottle, right? The one that's like it's also 55% ABV, whereas Gyal is 45%. So part of kind of an experimental series, I think, or I don't know if the word experimental is used or not. If you use the word experimental around Richard Seal, for example, he does not like that word. So I try to choose my words carefully. But what was the making of this rum like? And I imagine once you get into going that far into fermentation, bringing native bacteria into the picture, things can kind of like go in all different directions. So what was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as we kind of nailed Gyal and we knew what we were doing with that and production side, then I started playing around with like long fermentations and stuff like that. So we took a couple of different kind of commercial yeasts, and we were just like, we use one type for one of the fermentations, and we use one type for the other 2. But then we had, again, as soon as we started production as well, we started putting aside some of the dunder from the still and just leaving it to the open air. And we kind of feed it, we put a little molasses in there, and then we just kind of let it mature and do its own thing. And then
is that just like is that inside the distillery? Like where do you store something like that?
We've got various different IBCs dotted around the place. So one thing that I did notice in the last couple of years is that you get so much more action in the summer than you do in the winter, which is kind of obvious, obviously. You know, in the winter here, the temperature drops right down. It's consistently below probably 8 degrees for months at a time. So you don't get the same kind of like activity with wild yeast and bacteria and stuff like that. You do get, there's still things that happen, but it's just not the same as in the summer. You've got, you know, all the flowers are open. You've got plenty of pollinators flying around, and they spread yeast a lot and things like that with wild yeast and whatnot and different bacteria. So you've got so much more going on, and the heat really kind of amps up the kind of reproduction cycle and everything for all these bacteria, yeast and things. So for doing more, we had already tried like a few like longer fermentations of like a couple of weeks, and then you start to see the pellicle forming on your wash, and that was just from normal yeast that have done the alcoholic fermentation, and then you leave them open, like our fermenters just left the tops open, and then you can see some of the, like say, the pellicles forming. You know something's happening, and you can get a change of smell in the wash, and then they start to bubble, and you get almost like a secondary fermentation a lot of the time. Whether that's alcoholic fermentation or like kind of bacterial fermentation is a different story. So we tried a few of these in different lengths of time and different times of year, and we found that, you know, summer was the best time to do it. And then we started messing around with the dunder, adding some or other things into the dunder, like fruit skins and whatnot. And
okay.
we left that for a little while, and then after I don't know, a couple of months of that mature dunder, if you like, sitting, we then kind of add some of that into the wash and leave it for another couple of weeks. And that's really where Umor was born. It was 3 fermentations between 5 and 6 weeks long. Like all of them, one of them was 5, the other 2 were 6 or something like that. And we had a couple, 2 of them that were, the nose off of it, there's a lot of acetone there, you know, the model airplanes and nail polish remover.
Yeah.
For me, I've always had that association with the little boiled sweets you used to get called pear drops. And that's all I could.
Oh, I've never had one. I've never had one of those.
I don't know, maybe it's a British thing, I'm not sure, but a little pear drops you used to get. And I had them as a kid, and I always remember them. I was like, that's exactly what that reminds me of. And
nice, yeah.
It is FPD on the bottle.
I was going to ask, what FPD stands for, because I kept looking, you know, I saw long fermentation FPD, and I was like looking for words that started with FP and D, and I couldn't find them. So what is FPD?
FPD is funky pear drop.
Funky pear drop. That's okay. I have to like Google what these pear drop candies are.
Yeah, we never actually put it anywhere in the bottle, but that's as soon as I was smelling the wash and the spirit as well. After that, I was like, that's some funky pear drops right there. So I don't know if you can find. I'm sure that's what they were called, and I'm not just making it up. I have to check now.
Is this? I'm sharing my screen. Can you see these?
Yeah, that's it.
Do these look familiar?
That's exactly it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so for those listening, if you Google pear drop candies, you'll see exactly what Ben is talking about. Okay, I have to get my hand. Maybe I can order. I bet I can order some on Amazon. I'm gonna try that, and I'm gonna do a little tasting with the FPD and see how it goes.
So yeah, I mean that's we would like to say we tried these 3 fermentations, different yeasts. The native bacteria side of things were things that was naturally introduced when we had these open top fermentations going.
Okay.
So it wasn't necessarily bacteria that we had like harvested and then added into it. It was more just what was naturally available around the distillery. And I've always been quite fascinated with that kind of side of things as well, because we had some fermentations and distillations that turned out nothing like that as well. They were quite different. They were still
really
like, and you know, you say funky, but it's not the same. I think you mentioned that in the podcast where you tried it. It's not like Jamaican funk. Or
right.
Not necessarily, you know, there's maybe a couple of things that are similar, but it's not really like anything else that I've tried necessarily. There's similarities with a couple of things, and I think, you know, what we can get is we're not going to be the same. And even if you try to be the same with a lot of these other distilleries, I don't think you could really ever replicate what they're doing, because you're in different parts of the world, there's different climates, there's different microflora around. There's everything that's different. You know, you use different water and everything like that as well. And so
yeah,
I was really happy when we had these fermentations. It smells promising, and you know, you taste it, and it's like that sour bitterness in the wash and things like that. And then when it came to the still, initially I was like, next one, we've kind of struck gold with this a little bit. So we made our cuts for that batch. They were, like I say earlier on, they were a lot tighter than what they had been for a lot of the other distillations we've done. And the next couple of fermentations turned out really well too. And we kind of been working with that and combined. We had the three different distillations, but I would actually, they weren't just like a straight blend between the three of them. They were different ratios. So I tried it in different ratios to see what would work. And that's what you, in the bottle there, is what we settled on. But yeah, it was an interesting one with the Unmore, because at that point it was so kind of hit or miss with what we were going to get. You can try and promote certain things in your fermentations, but they're not temperature controlled, and you've only got so much control of how it's gonna go. So yeah, it was interesting what we ended up with, and I was happy with that bottling. We've got some more spirit that I distilled late last year that is a potential for a base for the second release of Unmore. So it'll probably be still called Unmore, but it'll be like batch.
Okay, so it'll same name but different batch.
Yeah.
Variations. Yeah. Okay.
It
Awesome.
probably will be, quite a bit different than the first one. One thing I've been doing more recently there actually is I've got a new microscope.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I've been looking into different yeasts, like wild yeast and things like that. And I think that's the next kind of evolution of what Even More will be. Is it's going to be a more refined version, if you like.
So how does the microscope come into play? Are you studying the yeast to see what you're getting out of the natural environment?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, we took pictures of some of our wash that we had a 2-week-long fermentation with some wash. There was a bit of a sluck fermentation, and anyway, we had to skip its distillation for 1 week, so we pushed it on another week to the second week till it finished a little bit lower in the gravity. And we put that under the microscope. So I was like, I wonder what it's like now after a couple of weeks. 1 week you've got the yeast strain we use, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. It's like a killer strain, so it will go and kill off anything else that's in the wash. That's the idea, anyway. So any kind of wild yeast or anything like that is quite good at getting rid of them early on. But after this one was stuck, and after another week fermenting, and it's still finished quite so we use, I don't know how much your technical knowledge extends to like gravities and things like that, but the gravity of the wash are
not that much.
Okay, that's fair enough. So your gravity of your wash, the higher the gravity, the more sugar is still available for the yeast to eat.
Okay.
And that's how you measure how much sugar and how much potential alcohol you can get from your wash. So
right.
Gravity was still quite high, which meant there was still quite a lot of residual sugars in the wash. But it wasn't, it was dead, it wasn't fermenting anymore. And I was like, I wonder what it's like. So I've taken a little sample of the wash and put it under the microscope, and this one goes up to 1,000 magnification. So at that magnification, you can see individual yeast cells quite easily. You can see the hop marks on the Saccharomyces cerevisiae where you can see where they've been budding. But what was interesting, we also had some kind of rod-shaped yeast, which is, they're like a lot of people, I'm not sure, they're fission yeast, but there's different types of fission yeast as well. But that's what everyone for a while was going on about S-POM, which was Schizosaccharomyces POM. And
right. We're getting into Boston Apothecary territory.
They had spoken about it a lot. Richard Seal talked about it quite a bit, and there'd be a few other people spoken. So I was interested to see that there was even some of these fission yeast, and after those 2 weeks, and the fission yeast take a longer time. Sometimes it'll look like a fermentation stuck, and then after a much longer time, they'll start to chew their way through the remaining available sugars. And there was also the presence of quite a lot of bacteria and things like that as well. So it was interesting to see that underneath the microscope for the first time, because we only recently got it.
Yeah.
You can start to identify it, and I'm still much an amateur when it comes to using the microscope and identifying what I'm looking at. But it means I can start learning about what to look out for and identifying what's in our wash and the composition of it. You can never truly identify what strain of yeast that you're looking at necessarily, or what bacteria you're looking at. Or maybe some people can, but I don't think it's really possible. You need to get it analysed further and sent away and things. But it'll give us a ballpark, if you like.
Right, right. You can start to recognize things once you've gone through, multiple batches. Go like, oh, we've got some of this again, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so you can see recurrent what's going on. But the idea with the microscope is that we will be able to isolate colonies of yeast, and then you can put it underneath and you can identify, is it a yeast you've got or is it something else? So when you're swabbing for wild yeast, for example, you can go and take flowers or heather or grass or anything you like, and you can swab for it, and then you can set it on a agar plate and isolate the colonies. You see different colors and whatnot growing on your agar plate, and then you isolate that and you take that, grow it, and such like. And then eventually you can scale it up and you can do like a viability test underneath your microscope and a yeast count. And you can test the viability. I think it's above like 60% or something like that. Then you can successful fermentation. So that's what the microscope's for. It's for moving on to the next kind of evolution, I suppose, of refining my own knowledge and knowing what I'm looking at, and possibly isolating a yeast from Islay that we could use in future batches of rum.
And it's interesting because, the word terroir came up when we were talking about molasses. And to me, this is where terroir can really, be a big part of the conversation with molasses rums. Not to completely rule out the idea of terroir being associated with molasses. I think there are some cases where that can be true and provide differences. But when you talk about the native yeast, native bacteria, the environments, all the microflora and everything like you were talking about, that, that's why it's basically impossible to make a rum that tastes exactly like a Jamaican rum all the way in Scotland, for example. Even if you have the same equipment, the same molasses, whatever, it's going to come out differently because of the environment that you're in. And that's what's really cool. So because, when I see, long fermentation, funky and stuff like that, I get interested, but I'm also, when it comes from a new type of rum location, new quote unquote different place, I'm always hoping like it's cool to be inspired by other rum styles, but I also want to see a unique, like your own style emerge. And so that's what I appreciated the most about this rum, was that it had some funky elements. Like there was some of that fruitiness, but it wasn't at all like a Jamaican funk or, a Haiti funk or anything like that. To me, it's Islay funk, I guess we have to call it now. So yeah. I wanted to ask, by the way, the label has a lot of different things on it. There are some birds. I'm guessing this is a native bird. I'm not sure what it's called. There's an airplane, an anchor, an anvil, a cross, a boat, a little barrel of rum. There's a lot. It's an intricate label. Are there any, we already found the secret FPD meaning. Are there any hidden meanings in the label here? Any Easter eggs?
Yeah, I mean, if you're familiar with Islay, then I suppose it's one big Easter egg. But everything on the label represents like an aspect of Islay. And we wanted it to be very personal to the island and, to us and everything as well. So right in the very front, there's our still, obviously. And then we've got the lighthouse, that square building right next to it.
So that's this right here.
That's right, yeah. So that's one of the few square lighthouses around the UK. It's right across the bay from us, really. So that's a kind of a significant part of Port Ellen where we're based. And then we've got pantries there. We have actually got our own little cord lane pantries on the distillery grounds. So they're not quite.
No way. I was going to ask you. I was going to say, I see palm trees on here. Where can I find palm trees in Islay? So you're telling me there actually are palm trees.
So I don't know if you can see out the window there, but there's
I do, yeah. We've got it's a palm tree in training right there.
Yeah, we've got a couple other ones that are a little bit bigger, but yeah, they do grow quite well over here, surprisingly enough.
Wow.
So we've got those, and then so what else? We've got the Sunderland seaplane. It's got a historical kind of thing for Ireland, which is the plane you see there. That was one of the experimental seaplanes in the latter stages of World War II, and one of them crash landed. And it was
really?
local guys who went to recover the plane and the people from the plane in the lock and doll, which is our lock, right in their sea lock, right in the middle of the island. So that's a kind of a quite historical significance, if you like, to the island. And then you've got the Clondalton Cross. So the Clondalton Cross there is, again, That's like forgive me if I'm making this up. I think it's around about 1,300 years old.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it's still erected about 10 miles from where we are now.
Oh, okay.
10 miles, probably about 5 miles or something like that. So it still stands now next to an old church. And again, so it's a massive historical importance to the island. It's one of the oldest like carved crosses like that, Celtic crosses, if you like.
So this is really this label is just it's not just Islay in name, it's Islay all over through and through.
Yeah. Then the barnacle geese, they're kind of iconic for Islay. They come back every year. They come down from.
Okay.
And then the anvil is I'm a amateur blacksmith, so I do a bit of blacksmith.
No way. What are some things that you've blacksmithed?
This coat hook behind me.
Oh, nice. Okay. Very cool. It looks like a very sturdy, very well-crafted coat hook.
There you go.
There we go. That's nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I kind of, to be honest, a lot of what I make, I kind of play around. I've made bottle openers for everybody. So,
oh,
actually,
nice.
I think I gave Maggie one of my bottle openers when she visited.
Oh, that's an A+ souvenir to come back with for sure.
Yeah, and I've given it to. There's been a couple of my pals and mates in the industry and things like that. I've given bottle openers. Evar's got a bottle opener. I made him a little guitar one because he plays guitar. So anyway,
nice.
Yeah. So I kind of just play around a lot of time. To be honest, yeah, made to make my wife candle holders and stuff like that.
It's a good way to take out your frustration on things. Probably, when you've got a new release coming up and you're worried about it, you can just go pound it out on the anvil.
That's right.
On the note of aging, because all the releases so far have been unaged, if I'm remembering correctly. Right. You've mentioned you've got some stuff aging. What does the aging program look like? When can people expect an aged release? The hard question to answer probably, but what does it look like in terms of casks that you're using and things like that?
It's pretty varied, to be honest. We started aging probably quite late. We didn't start putting spirit in the casks for a good few months after we started production. We focused so much on getting the still up and running and on the production side of things that it wasn't in any of our heads to begin with, to be honest. So it took us a good few months to actually fill anything into casks. And even the first casks we filled, you're expected to be ex-bourbon, virgin oak, or whatever. And the first 7 casks we filled were like ex-sherry and Sauternes wine casks. So it's just, and then we went on to do, we've got port pipes, we've got various different sherry casks and butts. We've got some ex-bourbon, we've got virgin oak, there's Madeira.
Got a little bit of everything over there.
Some red wine casks, like some Bordeaux red wine casks. We've got a bit of everything. We've got some also, then we've got some Islay whiskey casks as well, which will be a kind of theme, I suppose. Will be one of our main expressions, I guess, will be from ex-whiskey casks.
Well, you mean, they're your neighbors, so you have kind of a natural connection, and it plays right into the Islay expectations that people have. Yeah. So, yeah, it seems like a very natural thing to do there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not saying like all of the rum that we release will be from like a peated whiskey cask. I wouldn't want to do that, to be honest. Yeah, like it's nice having the options there, and it's good to have so many options. But we'll have other things as well. But yeah, we've been aging in so many different things. Most of the production that we've been making has been going into casks. So I'm not sure of the exact figure of what we've got in casks now, but it can't be far off getting to a couple hundred casks or something like that, I think.
I'm guessing no temperature control on the aging environment, or is it?
No, it's just natural. Like most places in Scotland, I don't think there's many that have got like humidity and temperature control. There is some.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's a lot of our casks, a lot of our stock is sitting amongst whiskey right now. So we are in the process of building our own warehouse. So we're renting space for our casks for the time being. But yeah, we're making a small warehouse at the back of the distillery right now. It's kind of at the starting phases of this.
Nice.
So yeah, it'll be really good to get that up and running. It means we've got a bit more space. The idea is eventually, it'll free up some space in the distillery itself, so we can add some more fermentation space as well.
Very cool.
So that's good. That means we can try, because right now if we've got fermenter taking up one of these longer fermentations, they can go on for weeks at a time, and that's one ferment for normal production. So hopefully when we get this up and running, we'll have more time to do experimental, sorry, Richard Sheila, longer fermentations and stuff like that. Yeah, so it'll be good. It'll be interesting. This next year is going to be, or I say next year, I've become everly increasingly more patient. So
Yeah.
a year isn't a very long time. So yeah, I think the warehouse will be finished hopefully by between October and December this year, and then so the start of next year we can really start experimenting with some more stuff.
Do you think, and it's fine if you can't answer this yet, but are you thinking toward doing single cask releases, blending casks for your first release, or are you keeping all options open?
I think we will do like a little bit of everything. So we've got an aged release coming up this year, and it's it's still quite young. We've only been in production for a couple of years, which means it's obviously going to be quite young. But I think this one it's not it's like a non-age statement rum, so it's more than I think. Yeah, it is. It's more than about 18 months, but it's more than it's more than 14 months, but no more than 18 or 19 months or something like that. But we're not putting
Gotcha.
age statement on it or anything like that. So it is quite young, but it's interesting. It's quite punchy. It's got a bit of flavour about it. I've been kind of sampling some of the spirit recently, and it's a combination of a few different casks. So it'll be kind of part of our core range, if you like. But then there's nothing to stop us in the future from doing a single cask, and we probably will do that. Most of the distilleries around Ireland, they've released like one of these festival bottles, or they'll release a couple of festival bottles, and it'll be like a single cask or a collection of maybe a couple of casks, and they'll release it for their kind of festival bottle. So we might follow suit and do something like that in the future, but I think it would need to be something quite special for in order for me to be happy to release it as a single cask like that. And I would say as well, we probably wait till our rum is a good bit older before we do anything like that as well. I don't know if there's much point in releasing like a 18-month or a 2-year-old single cask, unless it was maybe like a little log tave or something like that. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I think sometimes you find something that is special enough at that age. But if you can afford to wait, then, it usually doesn't hurt waiting past that to see where the rum goes, sort of. Unless, like you said, you're aging something like super small.
Or I suppose the other aspect is if we had done one of our longer fermentation and we put that into a cask, I mean, maybe like lightly age that to see how it developed over the course of like a year or something. That could be quite interesting. But that's, no plans or anything like that for right now, at least.
Yeah, I've had some interesting younger rums that were kind of longer fermentation, funkier type rums that were aged in something like very expressive, like virgin oak or something like that for a short amount of time, where it really picks up a lot of oak fast, and the rum is really punchy, so it's big flavors meeting each other, and some of those I've found to be quite tasty, under 3 years or so. But yeah, the great thing is it sounds like you have a ton of options, so it'll be really exciting to kind of see all that come together. One more thing I wanted to get to just before we kind of wrap things up, we've neglected to mention the building that you're in, which is known as the Old Lemonade Factory. And I kept trying to Google information about the lemonade brand that was there previously, which I believe is called Hattier's. Is that the name of it?
So the lemonade or the soft drinks that was made here it was known as Hasties.
Hasties. Okay, that's right. That's it. Hasties. I couldn't, I don't know if I was Googling the wrong thing, but I couldn't find anything about this old brand. But what I did find out, and this was just my own ignorance for having never been to the UK, lemonade is very different in the UK from what we know as lemonade in the States, which is just a combination of lemon juice, a shitload of sugar, and water combined together. It's more of like a sparkling soda over there. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So
okay.
There's not a great deal of information. I looked into it and asked a lot of the locals and things like that, because a lot of the kind of older generation had worked in the lemonade factory when they were younger. So Milton was first erected in 1957, and they made soft drinks here. So limeade, lemonade, like cola, a variety of different things, until sometime in the 70s. And then some point in the 70s, They started up. It was always in glass bottles as well, and it was the whole thing was done here. I think they would just buy in syrups, to be honest, yeah, and then they would
Okay.
carbonate them on site, and that's what they sold here. So we had it was two brothers, Donald and Harold Hasty, who started it, and then, like I say, in the 70s, when importation into Islay became cheaper and more readily available, the sales dropped off on the island, and they were importing a lot more into the island at that point. So it then just became a distribution point for the local restaurants and bars and hotels and things like that. And even then, in kind of the early 2000s, it changed hands a couple of times and just went downhill from then. So, but yeah, that was the original kind of like story. It was actually two guys. I mentioned Donald and Harold, and they were actually the uncle and or the grandfather and great uncle, I suppose,
Okay.
of the original of the guy who did the building work here.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's really
Yeah, it's a
cool.
good little continuity there as well, which is nice. So it's Scott Hasty who has done all the building work for us.
It looks like a really cool building too. I think you guys kind of redid the outside. It's like white and blue together. It's a very striking kind of building. So it looks really cool. It looks like a great place to, attract visitors and things like that, which you guys don't have like a formalized tour experience quite yet. Is that
That's
correct?
right. Yeah. So because we're just so small, and
Yeah.
it's myself and my colleague Johnny who works here at the distillery all the time. So when people come, we don't have time necessarily to say we're going to like set up a tour system. We're going to have a set time every day. Generally speaking, people will either just drop in and we'll just deal with it as it comes, or
Yeah.
we'll phone up and then we'll maybe arrange a time that day depending on how busy we are. We'll plan around schedules and stuff like that. But hopefully, at some point in the future, like I say, the warehouse that we're erecting now is hopefully going to have space for a small shop. So, fingers crossed, at some point in the future, we'll hopefully have a small shop there, and we can organise like a tour system a little better, and hopefully have someone employed to kind of do a tour for us, if you like. But
Right.
right now, it's
Yeah.
very informal. We just show people around as they can arrive. It's very personal. I think a lot of people like it.
Yeah. I mean, what's better than you get to meet everyone who's working on the rum pretty much. So, that's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
no, it's been good. And it goes down well with folk who visit. So but yeah, hopefully at some point we'll get that. But anyway, it's a cracking building. It would have been easier just to knock it down and start again. But
Oh,
yeah,
really?
we did like I said, we did full kind of renovations. So all the walls were completely knocked back and replastered. There were new roof timbers, new windows, new doors. All the concrete work inside was redone to allow for the weight of the equipment. And then all of the outside was completely landscaped and new walls around outside perimeter and
Palm
concrete,
trees.
of course. Yeah. Yeah, so it was a lot of work, but it looks really good now, and it's kind of restored a building that was in such dire straits back to its former glory. So and
Yeah.
that was very important as well. Like I'm a local here, and I knew the building was iconic and local and important to all the local people here. So we didn't want to take that away.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the kind of idea behind the building, at least.
And plus, now you can put distilled at the old lemonade factory on all the bottles, which sounds pretty cool and interesting, right?
No,
So, it's another bonus.
conversation piece and a little bit of a nod to our history, I suppose. Which is a trend,
Yeah.
I suppose, that's follows right the way throughout everything that we've done. Is a lot of it is focused on the sort of historical aspects of rum and of the island and things like that. It's I would say it's traditional, but it's about as traditional as making rum on island. So
Yeah. Awesome. Well, before we go, we have a tradition of how we end the show, which is normally masterminded by my co-host John, which, as I said, he is currently traveling in Italy and was unable to join us. Unfortunately, he's sad he couldn't be here, but I've promised to carry on this segment in his stead, which is our rapid fire segment. So what we do, if you're not familiar, we put about 60 seconds, a generous 60 seconds on the clock, and I run through a bunch of short questions that you answer as quickly as possible. We present this as an optional segment, so before I just rush into it, I'll ask if you're up for it.
absolutely.
Okay. All right. Got 60 seconds. I have to pull my questions up here. Again, I'm not used to this. Normally John is steering the wheel here, so hopefully this doesn't go off the rails. So, all right, I've got 60 seconds and I will go. Okay. Neat or on the rocks?
Neat.
Column, pot, or blend?
Hot.
Obvious answer, right? Aged or unaged?
Oh, that's hard. Recently, it's been more unaged.
All right, that makes sense. Molasses or cane juice?
That's too difficult as well. Prob- Probably molasses. Oh, I do love cane juice.
Yeah, you can say both if you want. If you could make a batch of rum at any distillery in the Caribbean, which one would it be?
Hamden.
Got to be Hampton. I knew that would be the answer. Okay. What's one other UK rum producer that more people need to check out?
Jago.
All right. Yeah, I enjoyed the Jagows that we had on our episode. The Scottish accent, I think, is among the most imitated accents you'll hear. What do you think is the ideal punishment for a bad attempt at a Scottish accent?
Oh, man. You need to eat a kilo of haggis.
A kilo of haggis. Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. Other than visiting rum and whiskey distilleries, the best thing to do when visiting Islay is what?
Soak up the beaches, definitely. Just to take in the landscape.
Beaches.
Beaches are amazing.
My co-host, John, he has recently come to the conclusion that despite liking peated whiskey and liking rum, he does not like rums that are aged in peated whiskey casks. So, as a rum maker from the heart of peated whiskey production, I ask you, Ben Inglis, is rum aged in peated whiskey casks? Is it overrated, underrated, or is it just misunderstood?
I think it's probably just misunderstood right now.
You're going to seek to change that a little bit with some of your casks, it sounds like. All right. And last but not least, when we had Kit Carruthers from Ninefold Distillery on the podcast, he traced his family lineage all the way back to Robert the Bruce. As a rival Scottish distiller, is there any chance that your lineage goes back to John Comyn III of Badenoch, who I understand was the rival of Robert the Bruce?
Absolutely not.
No chance. All right. That's time.
Well, that was a good 60 seconds.
Yeah, a good 60 seconds. An esteemed performance from you. Thank you for being a good sport and being patient. And I'm nowhere near as good at John as coming up with those questions. So we'll hopefully have him back very soon so he can take the mantle up once again. Thank you so much for spending the time on your Friday afternoon talking with me here. Before I let you go, is there anything we didn't get to? Any news about the distillery, about stuff coming up that you want to let people know about?
I don't think so. We covered pretty much everything, yeah. But, if you're in Scotland or you come to Thailand, pop in and see us. We're always welcome. We're always welcoming, and keep your eye out for a new release later in the year. So we should, your listeners are probably far and wide as well. I don't know if it's just the States, but we're still working in distribution in the States. But I think we're distributed in about 8 different countries now. So hopefully we'll
Awesome.
Over here soon.
You're so new, I didn't even want to broach the subject of distribution in the US because I know how crazy and convoluted and difficult it can be, but hopefully we will eventually see Islay Rum in the US. That would be very cool. I do know, I think there are still some Unia Moore bottles on the Whiskey Exchange, which does ship to the United States, which is how I got this. It was packed impeccably. Great packing job on their part. So any American listeners who are interested in trying that, you should be able, probably not for long, because like I said, there's only 165 bottles, but I think there's still some on the Whiskey Exchange if you want to go that route. But yeah, Ben, thanks so much. It was really great to meet you. Really enjoyed learning more about the distillery and everything you guys have going on. And I'm excited about what's next. So thanks again for stopping by.
Thanks very much, Will. Cheers.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening to another episode of the Rumcast. As always, we'd love to hear your questions, thoughts, takeaways from the episode. If you've tried any rums from Islay Rum Company, would love to hear what you think of them. As always, you can send us an email at host@rumcast.com. That's HOST@rumcast.com. Or you can hit us up on social media. This is normally where I would say, John, where can they find us on social media? But John is not here, so I will have to hopefully remember. I believe it is at the Rumcast on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're on YouTube now. The last episode we did, we published the video of that. So as I said, we're going to try to do some of these shorter, semi-blind rum review episodes and release those videos on YouTube. So subscribe to the channel there. Check it out. As always, if you want even more Rumcast, if you want to support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/therumcast. That's patreon.com/therumcast. We're doing happy hours. We've got a Discord going for Rumcast listeners. We've got bonus episodes, all kinds of good stuff. So give that a view if you'd like to learn more. And hopefully John is back soon. Actually, I know John is back soon. I said that as if he's embarked on a mysterious journey to which I don't know if he's returning. He is. He's going to be back soon. We will be back together with a new, fresh episode soon. And until then, cheers, everyone.